Hi, my name is Brianna, and welcome to an episode of Astral Projection Techniques.
Hi, I'm Katie.
And today we have with us Robert Peterson, who is an author of Hacking the Out of Body Experience, Out of Body Experiences, How to Have Them and What to Expect. And we also have a bonus guest with us today, Simon Barraclough, who is the mastermind behind Astral Projection Techniques, the Facebook group, and the reason why we're all here. Hi, Bob. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you? Thanks for having me on the podcast.
I'm glad to have you. Simon, how are you doing?
I'm good, Brianna. Thank you.
Good. So we have a few things to cover today, and I'd like to talk about some of your books. We have some Q&As to go over. Could you introduce yourself, Bob, and tell us, how you got started and, your first book, that type of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I first became interested in astral projection when I was a little kid. I heard somebody talking about it and I thought, oh, this would be really cool. I went to the public library at the time, way back in the 1970s or maybe even 60s, and looked in the card catalog and they didn't have any books on the subject, so I kind of forgot about it. And then fast forward to 1979, and my brother Joe gave my dad a copy of Robert Monroe's first book, Journeys Out of the Body. And I kind of remembered that trip to the library. And so I asked my dad when he was done with it if I could read the book, if I could borrow it and read it. And I read the book, and at the time I was very scientific, very science oriented, very skeptical about everything. And so I didn't really believe Monroe, but science, people in science should always keep an open mind, and it should be more about testing theories and figuring things out than trying to debunk or whatever. So I kept an open mind, and I thought, well, if what this guy Monroe is saying is true, I mean, he had all these wild stories about flying out of his body and, you know, looking at the rooftops and seeing all of these things. And I mean, as you progress in the book, it becomes more and more fantastic. And of course, he thought he was going crazy. He consulted doctor friends. He was a top executive at like a radio broadcasting, and so he had a lot of connections. He knew professional doctors. He talked to them, asked them if there was something wrong with him. I had talked to psychiatrists and psychologists, and they said, no, you're not crazy, all of this stuff. So my whole opinion was, if this guy is not, if he's telling the truth, if he's not lying to me, then we have to take it seriously and at least give him the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
And Monroe's one of the things he said is, may not be a direct quote, but he said essentially, don't take my word for it, try it yourself and see what happens. And then his first book gave a couple of different suggestions on things to try to induce an out-of-body experience. And so I thought, well, I'm not out anything doing this. So I thought I'm going to do this experiment and try to induce an out-of-body experience. And I tried his, what I think of as the lines of force technique. And in that technique, you basically imagine two lines of force coming from beside your temples, and they cross about a foot in front of you. And then you extend those lines slowly till they're 3 feet and all of this. And you have to relax completely. You have to do this intense visualization. And then at the end, when you go out to, you extend it out to 6 feet, and you keep extending it out. And at some point, imagine that there's a pressure growing between these lines of force meeting at this fulcrum or whatever. And then you imagine that it widens out to a 90-degree angle and goes over your head. So I spent a long time memorizing this technique from the book. And, I was young, I was 18 years old, and I thought, I'm not sure I interpreted his technique correctly, but I did what I thought he meant. And much to my surprise, I had an immediate reaction. I felt a twang in my head, and I thought, oops, this is serious. Before I thought, I just, full of it, whatever. And suddenly it's like very real, and it's like, oh my God. And so I tried to like stop the whole experiment and retract my lines of force. And what happened is I was overcome with the vibrations. I felt these heavy electrical vibrations throughout my body. I saw a blue ring, a circle of energy flying over my head. I mean, it was a very intense experience and very scary. I literally felt like I was being electrocuted by the vibrations. And so I started wildly thrashing and doing everything I could to stop the whole thing from happening. And I was successful. I eventually came out of that trance state that I had worked myself into. And I was, you know, touching my arms, like making sure I was still, back in the physical body. And I mean, at that point, I got up out of bed. I wanted to tell somebody, tell my mom or dad. They were both asleep. It was late at night and they were both asleep. And so I went back to bed and had a hard time sleeping. But it's like, I knew at that point that I had to, from a science point of view, I had to explore this further because I had just convinced myself that Monroe wasn't lying and that there is, if Monroe is, what he was saying is true, there is another reality out there, or maybe multiples of them, and there's a way to explore them while we're still in the physical world or attached to the physical world. We can leave our bodies and explore these non-physical realms. And so I knew, in being the very skeptical person I am and scientific person, I knew I had to learn more techniques and try and read all the books I could about it and figure out, well, what is the reality of this? What is the science behind it? And so that kind of started me on my journey. I learned a couple more techniques. I tried Monroe's technique a second time and it didn't work, or maybe I was just too nervous at that point. But I learned some more techniques and I was trying to induce an out of body every night for like about a month. And after about a month, I was one night had been staying late at the University of Minnesota, and I was into computers, and so I was up programming, and I was at the university. I came home late, and I was just too tired to do my normal practice, so I said I'll forget about it. So I skipped my practice, and that same night, the very first time that I had skipped a practice is when it happened to me. And it was a very bizarre out of body experience. And it's fully detailed in my first book. And the thing is, from there on out, I got better and better. I learned what works and what doesn't because I've always felt that I was not born with any special ability. I wasn't born with any natural talent toward these out of body experiences. I've always had to work really hard to achieve them. And so I've and that's good for the readers out there because I've spent countless hours trying to figure out what works and what doesn't, what absolutely stops an out of body in its tracks, what other people say about it, and the environmental factors and all of this stuff, trying to unlock the mysteries there to figure out what works best. And so that's kind of my story of how I got into it. So I started inducing more and more out of body experiences, and at the height of my out of bodiness, shall we say, I was having about three out of body experiences per week, and exploring them. They weren't always very long or involved. Some of them were much more long and involved than others. But I've had a lot of experiences that were just 1 or 2 seconds where I'd fly out of I'd separate from my body and then slam back in. And I came to think of these as like paddle ball experiences where like the paddle, you have a ball and a paddle and you're doing this with a rubber band between them. And so the ball goes out and then it gets slammed back in. And I had a lot of those type of experiences. But I also had a lot of experiences where I've likened them before to how a pilot learns to fly an airplane. What they got to do is, flying the airplane is not a problem. The problem is takeoffs and landings. And so what they do is they take off, they circle around, and they land. And then they take off and they circle around and land. And they do this over and over to learn the equipment, to learn the procedure, to learn how to handle the winds. And so I had a lot of these out of body experiences where I would induce the vibrations and I'd come out of my body and then I'd say, well, now what exactly was I doing there? And so I'd come back to my body and I'd do it all over again. And I would kind of do these things where I kept, figuring out what works and what doesn't. And so, like I said, some of my experiences are very short, a lot of them were, but I've also had experiences that were longer. Like I think my longest one was probably about, I don't know, 3.5 hours, something like that. And it's hard to judge an out of body experience because time can move differently, or it seems to move differently at times. So I'm sure
Mhm.
you guys are familiar about that. The thing about out of body experiences is that I was reading voraciously and collecting books on the subject. I've now got a library of like 300 books on the subject, and I've read almost all of them. And I kept coming across, when I had my own out of body experiences, I kept coming across things that were not talked about in the books. It's like I'd have these experiences where like my eyesight would be weird, and I'd be like, why hasn't anyone ever written about this? And so at some point, I knew I needed to write my own
Cover
book
all the
on this.
bases.
Yeah, so I wrote my own out of body book, the first one that you had mentioned, out of body experiences, how to have them and what to expect. And I put a lot of techniques in there, techniques that I've used and been successful with. There's a technique at the end of every chapter, and then I've got a chapter dedicated to it as well. But a lot of the book is dedicated to things that the other books don't really talk about. Things like, what happens if you leave your body, right? You leave your body and then you turn around so that you're not in the right way, and then you drop back down into your body. What's that like? That kind of stuff. They don't talk about things like that. Or at least
Mhm.
when I wrote my book, my first book, there was very little information out there. And now, like I said, there's like over 300 books on the topic. When I first got into this in 1979, there was like maybe 15 or 20 total, so we've
Wow.
come a long way, and now I'm thanks to like Facebook groups like Simon's group, Astral Projection Techniques, very popular group on Facebook. Thanks to groups like that and the efforts of Simon and you guys as well promoting astral projection, there's become a lot more interest in the topic. People are starting to explore those states and figuring out what this stuff is and exploring on their own. And I'm really happy that I can be a part of that.
Yeah, I love that you started your work, years, I mean, even before I was born. So it's like there was this whole trail blazed already for me whenever I finally figured out how to do this. And like I just stumbled upon it like you did. And look at what come from you just going to a trip to the library and getting that book. It's pretty amazing. And I'd like to go back to where you said you took a break and that's whenever finally you had that breakthrough. I tell people that all the time. Anybody that talks to me about, well, I can't do it, I can't do it. Stop practicing for a couple days. And that's
Right.
when it might happen. You just might, from it being on your subconscious, you might just pop out of body.
Yeah,
So,
you gotta take breaks.
yeah, I think that's the best advice to give somebody that's practicing, nonstop to the wall, just nailing it. Just take a break for a couple days and you might surprise yourself what happens.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I mean,
Simon, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was just saying Simon, and his group has helped a lot of people. I mean, I would know who you were because was researching the subject. That's how I found Simon. That's how I found you. That's how I found Yulman. Like, but this group has brought so many people together from all walks of life, all around the world, and it's a beautiful thing to see. I love it.
It is. And a big part of it is one thing I've learned. I was a computer programmer for my whole career and now I'm retired. And one thing I can tell you about computers is that it generates a lot of egos. There's a lot of
Mhm.
people out there who think that they're the big deal and they know more than anyone else and all of this. And they have these big overinflated egos. And I think the same thing happens with astral projection or out of body experiences. People who they start to have some of these experiences and they start to think, oh, I'm a god or whatever. They feel better than each other, better than you. There's a lot of egos and there's a lot of headbutting, and that's one thing I really like about the astral projection techniques group on Facebook is Simon and the other moderators, they don't tolerate that kind of stuff, the big ego stuff, and that we're here to help each other. We're all just giving the information and trying to get more people interested and getting it out there, helping people.
Right.
So many people on that group have come and said, this has happened to me, what's going on, or this is what's blocking me, and how do I get around that block? And there's so many people on that group who are willing to help and willing to, and they don't get the egos involved. I mean, there's just really no room for big heads
There's
and
not,
big
because
egos
we're all
and
still learning, and I think you can agree, and Simon can agree, he's still learning, Katie can agree, we're all still learning. Nobody has the answer for everyone, so if anybody comes and says, "Can you help me get out of body?" Of course, I can tell you what works for me, but I don't know if that's going to work for you, because
exactly.
I don't really have a solid technique. I just relax my body and roll off my bed or reach for the sky, that's my big technique, so I can't really teach a lot on the subject. I can bring things to the table that might help someone, or, have conversations like this, because it's all about the subconscious anyway, So if you're eating, breathing, sleeping, and taking breaks in between, I think that's the best, all around for just information.
Yeah.
As
And you're
far
right,
as,
conscious is a big part of it. I think a
yeah.
lot of it is ingraining in your subconscious the fact that you want to have these experiences and the desire to get out. One of the earliest writers on the topic was Sylvan Muldoon, and he wrote that desire is the biggest factor. And I mean, you can get wrapped up in the desire to leave your body, but part of it is that that desire ingrains upon your subconscious. And when you take those breaks, that's when your subconscious acts. It's like if you're learning any kind of sport or any kind of thing, your subconscious is there to help you do that, but you need to give it breaks too. And it's like pounding it into your subconscious, pounding, 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 and then when you give it a break, that's when it can act, right?
Mhm.
And that kind of can facilitate the whole thing.
Yeah, I think
So
that
go ahead, Katie.
you had mentioned that in your book, Out of Body Experiences and How to Have Them, Bob, where you were talking about, just reading books and how that kind of sends that message to your subconscious. And that's something I notice that really helps me when I kind of get stuck and I like to listen to books on tape. So, I've listened to yours that way. And so you were talking about how that kind of sends that message, and that seems to help me a lot too.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean that's what it's all about is helping people, and I mean that's what like the Simon's group. It's about helping people, helping each other, and exploring this wonderful state because I mean it's so realistic, and I mean it's so convincingly real. It's like I remember some people want to poo-poo it, and I remember Stephen LaBerge's first book called Lucid Dreaming. It's an excellent book, and LaBerge is definitely a pioneer, and he brought the lucid dream experience to light and gave it scientific credibility, and he did so much for that. But a lot of people thought that out-of-body experiences are the same thing as a lucid dream, and they're definitely not, in my opinion. And I've wrote extensively on the topic of what makes them different. And I've since talked to a lot of different experts too, like author Robert Wagner and other people involved in the lucid dreaming, and they also the vast majority of them say that it's a different experience. So anyway, but it's all about helping people understand and explore these things.
I can't lucid dream to save my life.
Oh,
So
really?
I think there's obviously, yeah, I can't. I think there's obviously a difference because I'm aware whenever I'm out of body, but whenever I'm dreaming, like I asked somebody if they brought Taco Bell yesterday and they had a pizza in their hand while I was dreaming. So I know I'm not lucid. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. No, I've had many lucid dreams, but I'm not real good at it either. I haven't focused on it much, but I've had a fair number of them, but not like it happens to me very often. I've had probably way more out of bodies than I have lucid dreams. But you can also transition from a lucid dream to an out of body, and it's kind of like waking up. It's kind of like when you're in a lucid dream you are conscious and aware that you're dreaming, and you know that what you're seeing around you is a dream. It's a self-manufactured, hallucinated environment, but you also have the opportunity to convert that to an out of body, mainly by dispelling the hallucination and making it dissolve away. I remember I think it was, what was it? There's one of the authors on astral projection books talks about wiping your field of vision. So if you're in a dream or whatever, you can pass your hand in front of your eyes to wipe your field of vision, and at the same time you make an affirmation that you know everybody who I'm hallucinating's got to disappear. And he'll be in a room of a dozen people and he'll do this. And then suddenly there's only like 2 people in the room with him, and all the other were hallucinations. And so there can be bleed through from lucid dreaming state to astral projection and that. And it takes a certain amount of finesse to get from one to the other, but they're definitely really cool states. I found that in lucid dreams, they're much more like physical reality. You'll be in a room, for example, and you'll see windows and floors and rugs and things like that. And an out of body experiences tend to be, although you can be in more of a physical like environment, they tend to be more ethereal, misty. I don't know how to describe it. They tend to be more surreal. They're not as crystal clear as a lucid dream. Lucid dreams can look really crystal clear, but out of bodies tend to be more ethereal, if that makes any sense.
I wouldn't be able to compare the two. Katie, do you lucid dream?
I've had some, and actually, I had never had any until I started, trying to practice these techniques, and then I started having a couple lucid dreams, and then, as a newcomer, it was just trying to figure out, okay, was that a lucid dream or was it an OBE? Or did I go from, because it felt like, I remember leaving my body, but then it turned into maybe a lucid dream from there. So that group, our group has been helpful, getting to ask those questions and figure out. And also, I know Bob talks about that in his books too. I always say I need to go back and take notes because there's so much information you could have that hacking the out of body experience. Like you can never run out of techniques and things to try. But back to the lucid dreaming, yeah, I've had some, and I kind of think I know what Bob's talking about, the difference with the, just having that ethereal feel
Yeah.
versus what about you, Simon?
Yeah,
Do you lucid dream more?
yeah, I've had quite a few lucid dreams, but I'm like Bob. I tend to go for astral projection most, and I skip that. But when I have transitioned from a lucid dream into an astral projection, I always seem to wake up while I'm in the vibrational state of my body, and then I go
Yeah.
from there. But I've never actually been in a lucid dream and like all of a sudden I'm in an out of body state. It's as if I have to wake up inside my body first in vibrational state and go through a whole separation to do it that way.
Yeah, for me, it's more like, I know I'll be dreaming and all of a sudden I'll become lucid and it's like, okay, I know I'm dreaming. This is all a hallucination. And I'll just I'll use my mind to just dissolve the hallucination. And it's like it will dissolve, like you're turning off a
Yeah.
television or something like
Yeah.
that. The whole experience just drops and then you find yourself maybe just hanging out hanging over top of your physical body, or maybe in another environment altogether, out in the middle of space or something like that. And you'll just, yeah, now I'm out of body, you can tell. But yeah, in my first book, I talked about this thing called the fantasy trap. And that is, if you're in an out of body experience and you start to fantasize about things, and you start to play what if, like, okay, you see a door, or say, well, what if, what becomes of this door? And you start to fantasize. If you do anything like that, it can deteriorate back into a dream, and it can suck you back into the dream state. And some people will get sucked back into a lucid dream state, but a lot of times it would suck me back into a regular dream state. The difference being one is where you're conscious and one's where you're not. So
Yeah, it's I wish I could, like I said, speak more on the differences of the two, but I've only became lucid, I think, twice. And it was really short lived and it turned into an out of body experience for me. So I can't really speak on the lucid dreaming part, unfortunately. Simon, what's your favorite technique? Like, how do you like to get out of body, or do you just, what's your go-to?
Well, I had to sort of like learn it all in reverse, Brianna, because it just started to happen to me through becoming aware during sleep paralysis when I was a child. So really, it's just more or less just letting go when I go to sleep. I don't meditate, and I should meditate, but I just relax and watch myself go to sleep.
Yeah.
but remain awake
Okay.
and hit the vibrations and woof, I'm away. But I will say the vibrations have really, really calmed down to what they used to be. I used to get exactly the same as Bob. It used to feel like I was being zapped. I'd get a couple of zaps, and then if I didn't break free of that were it. I was in for a ride. The old vibrations up and down the body, and I used to see that blue circle as well, Bob. It used to ooh, all the whistling, the whooshing, the screeching, the mechanical chirps, everything. And with me having no experience of it whatsoever, with me being so young, I went through all the demons in the bedroom and, the shadow men and all that. And through trial and error, I worked out just aspects of myself. They were part of my personality.
Yeah.
What I was fighting against. I was creating the monsters in my room. And it's because of the fact I seem to think is when your awareness starts to expand beyond the body, you start to perceive yourself from outside of yourself. And naturally, your analytical thoughts are thinking, there's somebody there. But it's you actually perceiving yourself, and that's what gives you this feeling that there's somebody in the room with you. And then obviously this fear takes over, and hey presto, you're in a living nightmare. What you can't get out of, and especially if you're in sleep paralysis.
Yeah, sleep paralysis is a big problem for a lot of people, and
Yeah,
I think that it's their dirty little secret or whatever. They're not sure what's going on, and they
yeah,
wake up and they can't move, and they're afraid, and they don't know why they can't move, and so they start to have their
yeah.
imagination goes
That's
wild.
it.
And the problem is you're halfway between sleeping and consciousness,
Yeah,
and so your imagination can become very real to you. You can start to manifest very
yeah,
real feeling
and it's
pictures.
like when you say hallucination. Yeah, they are hallucinations, but don't let the word hallucination fool you. They are real at that particular time. Because they can be full sensory. You can feel them. They overlay into that environment because, like you say, Bob, you're halfway in that state between dreaming and being awake. That's one of the main reasons I created the group, because of all the myths surrounding sleep paralysis. You'll get possessed and all this, and it's a lot of it's bull. And
Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree.
yeah, it's if somebody were having sleep paralysis and they went to the wrong place, they'd be terrified. It's
yeah,
Right.
some stories people come out with and stuff.
I remember whenever the group blew up, whenever Behind Her Eyes came out on Netflix and the
Yeah,
post we were getting. Do you remember?
yeah, yeah,
That was a fun time.
that was fun. Yeah,
Yeah, that was great. But
So
yeah,
you were
it just,
having
yeah.
to
huh?
dispel a lot of
We
things.
Yeah.
we give Jade some stick for that, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, it was back to back. I mean, we got a lot of members around that time too, but we've always been pretty consistent since I've been with the group. But yeah, it was just, I mean, people from everywhere, all ages, and just
That
because they watched it. I mean, it's interesting whether you know if it's real or not, it's still the possibility is
yeah.
interesting.
I mean,
right.
that's the thing with astral projection. It can make such a good horror story, can't it? And nearly every single film you see about astral projection, it's portrayed in that way. It's either horror or it's, what they call him, Doctor Strange.
Yeah,
You know,
The Conjuring does that to
yeah,
people. It's just where it's like it puts this view in people's heads that you're gonna get possessed and
yeah,
that something's gonna take you over, and then you
yeah,
have to kind of weed out others from thinking that that's how it goes, because I've had beautiful experiences that lasted for a while. It's not always, I mean, I've seen things that, like you said, it's not all fake. I've seen things that were for sure in my room, or that I witnessed and seen out of body, that were definitely real, or entities and stuff like that. But I've created things too to where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and walk past that. You just have to get to where it's not, you have to get past that fear factor.
Exactly. Yeah, fear can be a huge roadblock,
yeah,
and people can really misunderstand the experience based on fear and their own fears of what it is. Um, One thing that I always tell people, I've been doing this now for almost 45 years, going back to 1979, and the vast majority of my experiences have been very um, blissful. I won't say, a lot of them have been very elated. I feel just energized, and they're so fun. I mean, it's just so much fun. And then there's only been, a few, a handful, maybe probably less than 10, where I felt even remotely, scared or unsure of myself. And I think, Bree, you're right that um, it really helps to take a fearless attitude, take an attitude of, we're gonna, just explore the state, see what's out there, have fun with it, and just forget about the fear. If something fearful happens to you, deal with it, go back to your body, whatever. But the vast majority of experiences are fine, are really cool.
Yeah. I aborted a lot of out of body experiences in the beginning because I would get scared or, it would be too dark. And I got to where I wasn't being able to explore or do anything because I kept aborting these missions. And I'm like, finally, I just said, okay, I'm going to deal with it. And it's going to be whatever it is. I knew that I could get back to my body if I wanted to. Because as soon as I think about my body, I'm back within seconds. It doesn't take me long.
Yeah,
So I just went through with whatever was going on, and then that's whenever the cool things started to happen for me. Oh,
that's what I call nope experiences. You go out of body, you find yourself in an environment that it's like, nope, I'm not going to deal with this today, and you just come back, and then that's next time it'll be completely different, and it's better.
yeah.
What about you, Katie?
You know, and I've talked to Simon about this. I get in these patterns where I get stuck and I'm frustrated because I'll have, when my first experience occurred, which I kind of talked about in the last episode, and it was like the vibrations started after I was like, it was kind of in a dream, and I didn't know anything about astral projection or any of this. This happened spontaneously, but it was like I was holding two things that felt like I felt a magnetic push between them. And that started these vibrations that felt just so real. And it was that huge vibrations. And then, so when at some point later, I read your book, Hacking the Out of Body Experience, and you talked about the lines of force technique there. And that just kind of gave me chills because I hadn't heard it before, but it was that, like, it just reminded me of what I experienced with, the magnetic push, the push between the two lines.
Mhm.
So that was so cool. But I have gotten in these stuck patterns where nothing is happening. I've talked to Simon and he's like, he'll remind me, just let it be, just kind of take a break and then see what happens. And so, sometimes I think maybe as a newcomer for me, it's like I'm trying, I'm trying too hard. I'm focusing too much on what I need to do. And I remember in your book you talked about like quiescing the mind so that you're just passive and so I think that really helps because sometimes we get in that state where we're trying to make it happen too much or trying to make, but the vibrations I've noticed have lessened for me too. Like I really liked, at first they were really big and these electrifying, lots of sounds and stuff, and now they're just kind of very subtle. So that's interesting to see how it changes for people too,
Yeah,
over
and that
time.
changes. That's been my experience as well. I mean, the like Simon and what you're describing, my vibrations, got less and less and less to now where I don't even hardly notice them. And I'm not even sure that they're even there when I leave the body. And if I, do have the vibrations for whatever reason, it's kind of startling. It's like, wow, that hasn't happened in a couple of years. Suddenly I'm feeling the vibrations like, wow, okay, this is,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know what changed, but
Every now and again,
but yeah,
you get reminded of the full force. I have that quite a few times. You think, wow, such a long time since
I've
I
only
felt
had
that before.
vibrations a couple times, and it was recently, within the last month or two, I had vibrations. And I've had them like to where they're like, slight, but this time I felt like, I don't know what having a seizure feels like, but that's what it felt like. It felt like my eyes were rolling back in my head and my head was tilting back, but my head, I don't think my physical head was actually moving, but my whole head was like throbbing like really fast, like, and it was really intense, and I've never felt anything like that. And then that was one of like the longest experiences I had. Like it was really intense. So I feel for you guys that have had that numerous times. I'm glad I'm glad I don't have those. Like sometimes where I don't even know that I'm out of body. I've got up and went to the bathroom and went to flip on the light and it
Yeah,
doesn't come
I've
on.
done that many
Or,
times.
I'll get up and walk in the other room and I'm like, well, this doesn't look right. And then I'm like, oh, okay, let's go play around a little bit. But yeah.
Yeah, I've had that happen to me too, where I'll wake up in the middle of the night. I'll sit up on the bed and I'll stand up and walk around or whatever, and I see my dog laying at the end of the bed, and I'll stoop down and pat her furry chest and all of this stuff, and then all of a sudden I'm sucked back in the body, and it's like, oh, I didn't even realize I was out. It was so very realistic.
And
So
so for you both, you've been having them a lot of years, and it's just become easier since, does that seem to happen, over time, just having those experiences or do you go periods of time where you don't have any for a few months or?
yeah, everybody has dry
Yeah.
spells, and for me, it's gotten harder and harder since I got married, and I think there's a couple different factors there. I was talking to author William Buhlman, and author of several books, really good books, and he and I are so much alike, it's crazy. And our first books, both came out around the same time, same year, and it was crazy. When we met, it's like this could be another brother, although Bill is older than I am. But yeah, I mean, he um oh man, I lost my train of thought. What was your question again, Katie? What you were
Well,
Oh, the
and
vibrations. I remember. Yeah,
yeah.
so the vibrations, actually one of the things that Billman says is that um it's harder to induce an out of body experience if there's someone else in the bed with you. If he tries to induce an OBE and his wife is lying in bed sleeping next to him, it's hard. And same for me. I mean, if I'm lying in bed with my wife there, it's much more difficult for some reason. And neither Bill nor I know why. It's just kind of strange. Bill thinks, or he told me that he thinks it has to do with the overlapping auras, that her aura is overlapping with my aura or something like that, and that there's some kind of interference. So I think a lot of his experiences, for example, happened when he's like taking a nap on the couch or something like that, and when his wife isn't around. Sometimes my experiences have happened before. I usually go to bed before my wife, and she'll stay up and watch YouTube videos for an hour or something, and I'll do my OBE stuff. I remember one time years ago, many years ago, where I went to bed before my wife and I induced an OBE, and it happened right away, and it was one of these easy exits. And we were living at a split level at the time. So I walked down the stairs, and she was watching television in the living room in the lower level. And I'm standing in front of her and I'm waving my arms like, do you see me? Do you see me? And I'm like yelling and screaming at her to get her attention. And she didn't see me at all. I was completely invisible to her. And then I went back to my body, and then I came down the stairs physically, and did you see anything? Nope, didn't see anything. So it's pretty funny. But what I've found, and where the question originally came from, is as I get older, it seems like I've had a harder and harder time of inducing OBEs. And I think there's a couple of reasons behind that. One is I think some of the medications I'm on. Another thing is I have sleep apnea, and I know other people who've developed sleep apnea later in life. And the thing about sleep apnea is if you lie on your back, your muscles relax, and then you can't breathe properly, and you choke on your own whatever, and you can't breathe properly through your nose and all of that with sleep apnea. And if you look at the scientific information out there, most people, when they have an out of body experience, are lying on their back. And I've induced them on my right side, on my left side, on my stomach, no problem. But it's a lot more effort for me. To me, It's a lot easier if I'm lying on my back. And with sleep apnea, that kind of prevents that. So there it seems like there's several different factors that are impeding my progress. And that's kind of one of the reasons I have done so much scientific investigation on it and why I wrote Hacking the Out-of-Body Experience and trying to uncover what works from a scientific point of view and what the roadblocks are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought, it's interesting just those experiments that you've done and how like one of the things that I remember you saying was in your book was you thought I mean you were kind of going against, we try to get rid of those beliefs, those, that, oh, I can't get out of my body, I'm stuck. And you talked about, those times when you were stuck and how you were like, okay, I'm gonna sit or sleep on the edge of my bed because then I'll be more afraid of, or I'll feel like I'm gonna fall off my bed, and that'll trick my, you kind of like tricked your brain into, getting out that way because you knew that was a stronger belief than not being able to get, out of your body. So, yeah, some of those experiments that you've done have been interesting, just things to try.
Yeah, I wrote a article for my blog. I did my blog for more than 11 years, and I'm still kind of contributing to it once in a while, but not as much lately. But one of the articles I wrote on it is harnessing unfamiliarity to induce OBEs. And that's kind of what you're talking about, Katie, is a lot of people, and again, I've read so many books and articles and scientific papers and stuff, but a lot of people say that they try and try and try to have an out of body experience and it just doesn't work. And then they go on a trip, they go on vacation, and they're in a hotel room, so completely unfamiliar environment. And then they have an out of body just like that. And it's like, okay, what's different about being in a hotel or being at a friend's house? Well, you're in an unfamiliar environment. Your subconscious, your subconscious kind of like keeps more of a level of awareness of what's happening to you. It basically, instead of putting you in such a deep sleep state, your subconscious kind of keeps your conscious self more close to the surface, right? Because if you're in a hotel room, you don't know if there's people down the hall who are gonna, pull a fire alarm or kids running back and forth, whatever. And so you're in that familiar environment, and you have to be more at a subconscious level on alert. So your subconscious and your conscious are kind of closer together in that unfamiliar environment. So one of the things I've found is you can either take trips, go on rent Airbnbs, or just do simple things like Katie, like you were talking about, sleeping near the edge of your bed, or better yet, reversing so that you put your pillow at the foot end of the bed and the covers in reverse so that you're pointing a different direction completely from where you normally sleep, or doing your OBE practice on the couch or somewhere, like a guest bedroom in your house, that kind of thing. There's a whole lot of different tricks that you can play like that that will actually harness that unfamiliarity and get your subconscious to kind of help you out in that regard.
Yeah, and see, listening, or when I was following along with that book, that especially that hacking the out of body experience, and you just go, through all these different techniques. It kind of gave me the, I should never have an excuse to where I'm struggling, because if I don't, I really, you give so much information in there. If I've ever told somebody they should read that book, I say take notes, because there's so many different things to try. It's incredible.
Yeah, and if
Uh,
one doesn't work, then you can always switch to a different technique. And what I found is what works for one person may not work for another person. Some people need, like the target technique, where you're intensely visualizing a place you want to be in every detail. Or some people may find it more helpful to like use auditory imagination. I had a friend of mine, John, who was a roommate of mine, and his technique was to intensely listen and pretend he's hearing a song. So he would take a long song like Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven, and he would imagine every single note and nuance of that song, and he would get so involved, he would focus completely on the song, and then all of a sudden the vibrations would sweep in and he'd be free. But yeah, everybody needs a slightly different technique, and that book has a lot of them. But you got to imagine that book was released basically in 2019, so it's more than 5 years old. And I've collected a lot of more information since then, and I actually started working on a sequel and to Hacking the Out of Body Experience, and I'm not sure I even have a title for it yet. It's probably uh, Hacking 2 or something like that. Anyway, where I go into more things that I've figured out since then, and not only that, but the science behind out of bodies. One of the sites that I visit is Neuroscience News, where they talk about they study the brain and what scientists are finding out about the brain. Like there's a brain region called the anterior precuneus, and it's actually like sitting just in front of the visual cortex, and they're finding that it's more of a hub of the domain, one of the hubs of consciousness um, in the brain. And they're thinking that it has something to do with triggering consciousness to be aware and not aware. And so I'm trying to collect all this information and trying to put it into a book. And unfortunately, I'm not anywhere near the point where I could release any information now. I've got some of these tidbits on my blog from a couple of years ago, but I'm still collecting information, and I'm being distracted with other projects that I'm working on. So
And we're distracting you right now.
this is fun stuff. As you can tell, I get all hyped up,
Hmm.
and I love talking about this stuff. You want to talk about the Minnesota Twins or Minnesota Vikings or any kind of sports, and I'm like bored as hell. It's like
Same. Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, that
And because
doesn't
that's just
doesn't catch my
Minnesota sports,
interest.
because all our teams are crappy. But talk about OBEs, and I'm all about that.
I like
That's
conversation with substance.
Absolutely, depth. I
yeah,
can talk about this stuff all day with people like you guys.
well, and see,
Good.
I'm sorry. I got to let you guys talk more. I just am curious though. I hear, people in our group talk about, they love that space on Facebook, on our group to talk because they don't have other people in their life to talk to. And if, same for me, I start talking about this stuff with anybody, my friends or maybe some coworkers, and they look, you've seen the look, right? So
Absolutely.
Roll eyeball.
yeah, what do you guys find yourself in that situation with, I mean, or do you have I mean, you start to get to know your people, I guess, but
Yeah.
do you I mean, do people ask you, about, these things, and you try your best to tell them, try it for yourself? And I mean, or do you kind of just stick with the people in your circle that,
Well, when I was first getting into this, first thing I wanted to do is tell people. So it's like, I'm telling my brother, I'm telling, my friends, and I was in college, telling my friends in college and that. And my best friend in college was another guy named John, and not the same John that ended up being my roommate years later, but he was basically a physics major. So we were both very scientific oriented, and I told him that I started having these out of body experiences, and he looked at me like I was crazy. And he looked at me like, are you serious, kind of a thing? And it's like, yeah, and his basic reaction is, well, I believe that you believe, I believe that you think something happened to you, kind of thing. But he was very skeptical about it, and rightfully so, because I mean, if it doesn't happen to you, I was skeptical too. Until it actually happens to you, it's easy to be skeptical and just write it off as, oh, it's just a really vivid dream or something like that. It's like, no, this is a whole nother level beyond. And so what I found is that talking about it with people usually brought negative reactions. And so I clammed up. I stopped talking about it. And back then, there wasn't this great interest. There wasn't, all the social media out there, the Facebook groups, and there weren't all the books out there. It was like nobody to talk to about this stuff, and I felt very alone and unable to talk to anyone about it. After I wrote my first book, Out of Body Experiences, how to have them and what to expect, I didn't even tell my mom or my sister or brother or anyone in my family that I had written that book. And I don't know how they found out, but like my somebody came across my book and figured it out and put the two and two together, and it's like, why didn't you tell me? And it's like,
Wow.
oh, I don't know, so I didn't even feel comfortable telling my own family, and I was, when my mom found out that I had written this book and all of that, I was scared to death because I figured, they'd be all judgmental, because that's all I got at that point was judgmental.
Yeah,
She was very supportive. Told me she was very proud of me for having published a book and all of that.
That's
So
that's
I'll give
awesome.
wonderful.
her credit.
I love
Yeah,
that.
it can be very lonely, and groups like Simon's group give you a place where you can connect to other people going through the same thing, and to know that you're not alone. That's empowering. It's very, very powerful. I needed that,
Having
and
a
I
sense
didn't
of
have it.
community is great.
Yeah.
I would have never been here, if it wasn't for I had that spontaneous experience, and then before that, I like I told Bree, I just thought, astral projection was something that, yogis in India could maybe levitate out of their body or something just right above their body. So I understand, but like you said, when it happens to you, it's just like, yeah, the most exciting thing. You just wanna talk about it all the time,
Scream from the
tell people
rooftops.
about it. Yeah,
Yeah.
That's right.
yes. Simon did that, you
Uh,
said that yours started when you were a child.
I were a long wait for years until I think I was about 15, 16 when I were allowed to go to Leeds, very first time, with my friends, and I went into a Waterstone bookshop, and I found Robert Monroe's first book, and the cover just shouted at me, and I turned it over, I just fell to pieces when I read back of it. I want a long
Oh,
one.
Yeah, Robert Monroe really affected a lot of
Yeah,
people. I know he was kind of the impetus for my whole spiritual journey, and it sounds like Simon, you too, kind of.
yeah, I was completely lost, completely lost. In fact, to be honest with you, I don't really know how I made it through my teens. Because like you're rebellious at that age, aren't you? And I mean, at first, like you say, you want to tell everybody, so you start telling everybody. But when you're at that age, you quickly learn to keep your mouth shut because there's nobody they're crueler than children, is there?
Yeah,
right.
But secretly,
I've
but
talked to
but
people.
secretly, I was going through like a god complex. I was thinking, hey, I'm done, me. I've got superpowers because
Right.
time and time, time and
I love
time
You
it.
do,
again.
Simon.
I'd test myself. I'd be looking for, is this really real? And I'd be testing myself, and I'd be counting tennis balls in Gorings. And when workmen came and, how many's there? 6. Oh, yeah, 6. I'd written down how many, things like that. And I mean, when I started back in I was only 5 years old back in 1975. There weren't many cars around where I lived. You could count them on one hand. Do you know what I mean? And I'd fly around my neighbourhood. Well, I won't say I was flying then. I was doing big bunny hops over houses. I had some great ways of getting about. But yeah, I'd go out and I'd spot this certain make of a car, and then next morning I'd have a ride out to see if that car were there. Sure enough, it was there. That car, countless times. And I used to balance pins on windowsill and try and push them over, but no, go straight through. But yeah, strange, really
I
lonely.
couldn't imagine doing that as a child. Like, I had a lot of really vivid dreams as a kid. I remember I had a lot of roller coaster dreams as a child, like where I was on a roller coaster or like windy roads, like that went up and down that looked like roller coasters. Like
Mhm.
that was my dreaming as a kid. I don't know. Or, scary dreams because I've always been a scary movie fanatic. But I couldn't imagine as a child having those experiences and then wanting to tell somebody and then, I'd probably think I had superpowers or I was a witch for real.
I can't tell you how many times I used to try and wake my brother up. I'd be hovering over his bed like, wake up.
That's
But,
great.
you know, I used to float through into my parents' bedroom, and sometimes I used to see them both levitate just slightly out of the bodies, and
Yep.
I'll never get over that sight. So weird. I'd try and communicate with
Yeah.
them, but they'd be off dreaming. They would be out of the bodies, just slightly separated. And I think we all do that every night, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I agree.
Yep.
I think
Yeah,
And
Sylvan Muldoon said that we all leave the body
yeah,
like that and recharge, and
yeah,
that's been my experience as well. I've seen my parents doing that as well, just in their
yes.
bedroom, tried to wake them up and all of
It's
that.
it's kind of
Yeah.
creepy. But
and
Just a
didn't you
tad.
pardon?
and have you I mean, you've interacted or tried to interact with people, and Bob, I remember reading you saying that, you had this interaction where they said, "Yeah, I'll remember this. We're awake," and then you checked with them later, and they said they didn't remember it.
Right.
However, they had taken a couple naps or had fallen asleep, so maybe during that time, do you remember what I'm talking about in your book
Yeah,
where
I've had different things like that happen, definitely.
so it's like, does that happen, where maybe we are, off in an out of body state and just not conscious, of
I think that
what's
happens every
going
night.
on.
Oh yeah, every night we leave our bodies, every night, and we go off and do things. And not only that, but I think that we are, in my experience, we're tapped as a resource by non-physical entities. I've talked in other podcasts and stuff about I've had experiences where I'll suddenly become conscious and aware, and I'll like look around like what the hell's happening to me, and I'll notice like a very large light being next to me, like holding onto my shoulder and all of this stuff, and it's like we're flying somewhere on our way to something, and it's like I'm a resource. They're taking me somewhere to get some mission accomplished, and one of these light beings says, "Crap, he's conscious again," and the other guy says, "Well, put him back under. We need to get this, experiment rolling or whatever. We need to do this." And it's like all of a sudden, boom, lights out. I'm unconscious again. But it's like because I get glimpses of things like that, I know that that's happening under the covers. And I've had much more involved and vivid experiences of these, what I think of as biblical angels, because to me that's what they seem like. They are very business oriented. They're on a mission. They're trying to get something particular done. And I believe they're using people like me and you guys, because we can leave our bodies. They're taking us to these places, and because we're based in the physical, our vibrations are lower, so we can reach lower
Yeah,
levels of the astral, whatever. I mean, these light beings have such high vibrations, I don't think they can reach down. So I think they're using us to do like maybe soul
yeah,
rescues or something like that, where we're reaching these people that are almost unreachable to them, but people, like you and I can actually do that and achieve some kind of soul retrieval where we can get down to that level of these lower vibrating levels of the astral where people are stuck in the afterlife, whatever, as ghosts, whatever. Talk to them and convince them to go with you and bring them back up into a more positive state of being where they can interact with these light beings. And if you can raise their vibrations, whatever, then they can go off with the light beings and they can rehabilitate them and get them out of these quagmires of the afterlife. And I think that's a lot of what happens there when we're asleep and not even aware of it. And I think in a lot of ways, if we become aware like that, our conscious awareness just interferes because then we're like more focused on us and the conscious self and what our goals are and all of that. And we're more interfering with, they can get a lot more done, these angel beings, if we're unconscious. But yeah, that
That
definitely
that
happens
makes
out there.
that makes sense. That's really interesting. And do you think that sometimes with like if we have a really vivid dream and it feels really real that maybe we're partially conscious in an out of body state at all? Sometimes, maybe not all the times, but
Kind of, yes. I mean, the thing is, I kind of think of it in terms of four states, right? If you're conscious, you could be either in an if you're out of body and you're conscious, you could be either in a lucid dream where your environment is totally hallucinated, or you can be in a out of body where it's not hallucinated, but it's less malleable. Like in a lucid dream, you can change your environment around you. You can create a hallway and a doorway, and you can go through the doorway, and you can expect something to be on the other side of that doorway, and it will be. In an out of body, typically your expectations are not met. So that's the conscious out of body states. If you're unconscious, then and you're hallucinating, then that's a regular dream. So you're unconscious, you're hallucinating, it's a regular dream, but you're out of body still. And the fourth state is what I called shared dreaming. And I didn't make that term up. It's, other people have reported it. But the shared dream is cases in which you are aware or you're dreaming, you're not conscious, but it's not a hallucination. You're actually there with someone else. And I've had many of these experiences that I think of as what I call them is almost there experiences where it's like I'm on the edge of lucidity, but I'm not there. I'm still unconscious, but yet it seems like I'm in a real environment and talking with real people. And it's other people have reported, yeah, that I was in that same, one example is, I'll find myself in a classroom, right? And I'm in a conference room sitting around a table and like a conference room table, and there'll be a whole bunch of other people, and we're talking about, well, let's, do this and that and the other thing. Some almost like a meeting of astral projectors, like Jürgen Zive and all of these people, or Anthony Peake or whatever, and I'll be in a conference room and I'll know, but I won't be conscious. It'll be like a dream, but it's like a shared dream. And then I'll talk to people later on, and it's like, like Bill Buellman or somebody, and it's like, yeah, I was there in that same conference room at the same time, but I wasn't conscious
Wow.
either, kind of thing. It's like, well, that's weird, It's, but yeah, it happens. There's
Me and
different
you have
levels.
had something like that happen, Bob. I said, me and you had something like that happen. That you were teaching a class and I was in the class what you were in. And
Yeah,
I had asked you and you said I was teaching. I remember having a dream last night and I was teaching a class that I wasn't conscious, but I remember being in a class and seeing you and you were at the head of the class teaching. And I didn't
yeah,
even know that you have that happen often. And you said that you often teach classes. So I thought it was pretty interesting to
yeah,
validate that.
yeah, and not just classes, but like I said, meetings where I'll find
Mhm.
myself dreaming of that I'm in a conference room and with a bunch of astral projectors, and we're talking about some serious event that's coming up or whatever that we're planning
Right.
for. Not big like like a catastrophe or something. It's more like, oh, Jurgen's teaching this class here or whatever, and let's plan this event happening and all of that. It's more like planning events. It's weird. I
Yeah.
wish I had more conscious awareness during those things.
That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
I have a couple Q&As from a couple members in the group. Would you like to answer those?
sure,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right. So Melanie wants to know when the vibes start and you use commands like out of body now are more effective commands, or, is there more effective commands that you can use, or is it a matter of timing? Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
I've not really had a lot of success with that. I know Bill Gilman is a big proponent of that. He'll say that you have to insist, that this happens, and especially like if you're feeling really dull or, groggy or whatever, you can say clarity now, and you can demand that your awareness be increased and all of this stuff. He's got a book called Higher Self Now where he
Mhm.
invokes his higher self. And all of these commands where he just shouts it, demands it or whatever. My experience, I haven't had a lot of success with that, and I'm not sure why. Believe it or not, Brianna, I had an out of body experience several months ago where I did some experiments where I was trying to reach different astral projectors that I knew. One time I visited a friend of mine who's also an author in Colorado, Vicky Short, and so I went to her. I tried to project myself to her, and it was a very easy experience, but she didn't remember any of it. And turns out the environment I saw was non-physical. But getting back to on point, I had an out of body experience in which I found myself out of body, and I yelled and screamed, Brianna, now. I want to go to visit Brianna. Nothing happened. And I
Yeah.
ended up doing some other things, but it's like it didn't work for me. And I don't know why that is. And it could be a psychological roadblock, but for me it's never been about that. If I want to try and reach someone like Vicky Short or you, it's more a process of trying to like set an intention to that place and then pull yourself to that intention. Just shouting it or making a demand like that doesn't seem to work for me. Although one thing I will tell you is, if you could, there are what I call invisible helpers. There are forces out there, and I think of them as helpers. There are people out there that are, when I'm out of body, you can talk to them. I can almost never see them. They're invisible, but I can talk to them and I can say, can I get some help here? Can somebody please take me to something or other? And I'll hear a non-physical voice answer me and say, yeah, we can do that. We'll, hang on, we'll take you there or whatever. So that sometimes is helpful, but just the whatever now, I have a problem with that. How
I've been
about you,
doing
Tom?
trial and error as well with the commands, and I haven't had any luck. Door now, and I mean, I command it like I'm as loud as I possibly can be in my head, and I really focus on that or the door, and I
Mm-hmm.
haven't had any luck with it. But I have been brought out of body by imagining a object, like I have some seashells in the other room on my mantle,
Mm-hmm.
or like a dream catcher I have that's hanging in my living room, and I will focus on that and like think of myself touching it, the texture of it, and that works for me. But as far as the commands, I did the next level now or higher self now, and that's got me somewhere. But as far as getting out of body that way, no, I haven't. I haven't. But I keep trying it. It's just a trial and error.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to elaborate on that, or has anybody else had any luck with that?
I
The
don't,
commands?
I don't know. The vibrations for me is you have to think about them, but once they're about, if you do think about them, you lose them. I once heard, I think it was Jade Shaw. She said the vibrations are like trying to catch a butterfly. If you go after the thing, it will evade you, but if you stop still, it'll probably land on you. And that's the same.
Right.
That's the sort of frame of mind I need to be in with the vibration. Once they
That's a
start,
great analogy, Sam, and I love it.
yeah. Once they start the vibrations, I have to sort of like just step back and just ignore them for them to increase. And when you get it right, because they do start to increase and get faster and faster, and both you're away. But yeah, a lot of people seem to get stuck when they get into vibrational state.
Yeah.
I've found, but it's like everybody's different, But you do find some commonalities between some people and things like that.
I wish I had more advice to give on the vibrational state, but like I said, it's only happened a couple times. I go from just relaxing, and sometimes I'll catch myself snoring or starting to snore, which I've been told I don't snore, and I don't believe that anymore since I've heard it myself. But I will get to that point, and then I'll just start focusing on my breath, which I've heard others say, that you're not supposed to focus on anything that has to do with your body, but I just think of my breath as I'm doing, as I'm breathing in, I think in and out, in and out. And it almost takes the attention off of anything else that's going off my body. So I ignore the rest of it. And then I do sleep on the edge of my bed whenever I'm trying, because I just roll off my bed. But I've also noticed that you guys were talking about the auras earlier. If I'm sleeping with someone, I have luck. It's a 50-50 chance on whether I do while I'm in my bed with someone. If I sleep on my couch, I'm almost guaranteed to get out. And I guess it's a change of scenery. The couch feels different than my bed. I don't have someone right next to me. Any little thing used to stop me from, if I'd hear a sound, it would knock me out of that trance almost that I'm in, or the relaxed state that I'm in. And now I can have a fan going, I can have meditations going on the TV, the cat trying to get out of the basement, because I put him up so he doesn't jump on me. But yeah, it's just trial and error. Just trying to figure out what works for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we've got another one. Sue wants to talk about the hypnagogic state, and if there's any input on that, like what can get you through that, or
A good
is
sense of
it, you
humour.
know, we kind of covered that earlier. What'd
Yes.
you say, Simon? I'm
A
sorry.
good sense of humour. Yeah, that's what I found.
Yeah,
That.
the hypnagogic state
Yeah.
is, uh, I don't know about other people, but I've been doing this so long that I can get into the hypnagogic state like very quickly when I go to sleep. I can just lie there and watch images go by, and it's like, okay, this will go by, you know, a salt shaker will go by, whatever, and these things will appear to me, and it's a people should understand it's a normal, natural thing that happens when you fall asleep. But normally we're not conscious and aware that it's happening, right? So we don't bring our conscious awareness that deep so we can actually watch them. But if you do start getting into out of body and start learning to extend your awareness into the sleep state, you'll notice that you get all of these images coming. And what I like to do, and one of my most successful techniques, is I will watch the hypnagogic images, and you just basically have to make yourself still. And as soon as a thought occurs to you, or whatever, or a sound, you know, hypnagogic image or a hypnagogic sound, because it's not always visual, it can be auditory as well. But when something appears, you just basically look at it and study it and try to imagine that it belongs to you. So you basically take ownership of that thing. So let's, for example, say you see a tree, you think, that's my tree. You know, it belongs to me. That's my image. I created it. It's mine. And then what happens is it'll usually dissolve or float away or just completely disappear. And then you just wait until the next one appears, and you just keep doing this and grabbing them. And you basically can just keep following them. And eventually they'll gain more stability. If you, like, for example, one of the examples I used in my first book is you see an object, and you can try and not only take possession of that, but imagine turning it. Imagine that it's spinning around. Okay, this is my cube, or this is my octahedron. I love octahedrons. Show you a little octahedron, 8-sided thing. So you imagine the octahedron is spinning or whatever, and take control of it. And poof, it may disappear, and maybe it'll be replaced by something else, a crystal or a walrus or any kind of, it could be I've, you know, seen stadiums full of people, and you just focus on it and imagine it's yours, try to move it, and when it disappears, you just wait for the next one. And eventually they stick around longer and they last longer. And then you can gain more control over them because they stick around longer. And if you can do that, hold on to conscious awareness long enough, you can grab onto one, and then you can imagine that there's some kind of a gravity between you and it. Like, here's a crystal. So you can imagine there's a gravity between you and the crystal, and you can just imagine in your imagination, push that toward you and pull it from you and push it toward you like this, and imagine that it's having an effect on you. And then you kind of use that momentum to pull you out of body. And usually I get, at that point, I'm imagining movement, right? I'm imagining that my astral body is moving away from my physical body in tune with this object, the hypnagogic object. And a lot of times what happens is, if I'm successful, I'll feel a sudden sense of movement, but then boom, I'm like in my body, but out of it. And I'll be stationary. The vibrations will sweep in at that point, and then I'll be able to leave my body at that point. But I have to go through this motion, visualization of motion first. And the best way that I've found to do that is to watch these hypnagogic images and just keep watching them. Don't let them pull you in or you'll fall asleep. That's how we naturally fall
Yeah.
asleep, is by letting ourselves get pulled into those images.
Yeah, I catch myself whenever I'm practicing a lot. I will something, you know, you see something that doesn't even make any sense, like, you know, a dream state, and I catch myself, and that's whenever I know I'm on that teeter of a good spot to be, and then I bring myself back, and I can almost feel a shift of, like, whenever I pull myself out of that back to trying to just relax, and then I start focusing my breath, but I can feel that shift in, I don't know if it's in my head or my body, I just feel it, like, not where I'm pulling myself back in my body because I'm not out yet, but like that shift in my consciousness to where I was almost in that dream state.
Right.
So I actually, this past week, I stayed with family at home, my home state, Illinois, and I had a bedroom at a family member's house, and I was on that teeter, and I wasn't practicing at all. I was on that, mind awake, body asleep thing, I guess. And I start to hear this scream, and my kids are all in the next room. They've got bunk beds in the next room. And so I hear this scream. And I push Pat. I'm like, Jace is screaming. My son, he's screaming. And he's like, I don't hear nothing, but he jumps up anyway. And he doesn't even tell me he didn't hear anything. But after that, the fact he says, I didn't hear anything. And that doesn't happen to me often, to where I'm like just falling asleep and I start to hear things unless I'm practicing. And so, and it really sounded like it was him in there screaming. So I was like, I asked him, I said, because the TV was on. I said, did you hear it on the TV? He's like, no. He's like, I didn't hear anything. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to go back to bed now. I'll leave you alone.
That's the guardian of the threshold. I wrote a long blog article about that too, where your mind will trick you into aborting the experience by giving you visuals and auditory things like that to convince you, something banging on your door and wake up and the house is on fire or whatever,
Right.
So
I
yeah,
remember that, Bob. I remember reading that chapter, and then, it happens, and it's so frustrating because, you're just,
This close.
I
yeah,
know, it's frustrating. You're that close,
because
and then boom, it ruins it.
because those sounds are, I think, like Simon was maybe getting ready to talk about that. They can, something can really scare you out of it. Like it can be a scream, like Brianna, talking about that, or like a gunshot or a sound or something that just really scares you.
A loud bang. A lot of people report a bang. I've seen like scary faces jump out at me at the last minute kind of thing.
Mhm.
Good time.
It happens to all of us, but yeah, we all have our trials, if you will. And yeah, we
Right.
all have dry spells now and again.
Yeah,
You gotta be
Simon,
very
do you get
patient and just keep working at it. And I think the most common problem is that people give up. They
Mhm.
they don't give it enough attention, and they don't make it enough of a priority. I've probably gone the opposite way and given it too much priority. And so anyway, yeah.
We love how you placed your priorities, Bob.
Yeah,
It's been good for us.
yeah.
Well, I'm sure there's a fair amount of people out there who think I'm crazy, but it's been a interesting ride.
Mm.
Yeah. I have a few, I'm sure, I think that we all have that. A couple that probably think we're a little, off the wall with what we've got going on. At first, I didn't really share a lot. And now I'm like, let me share this because it's amazing. I still think it's almost surreal that we're able to do this because
Yeah,
for my whole life, I always questioned whether there was an afterlife, or I had, paranormal experiences, but nothing really for sure set in stone, like hear something or see something out of the corner of my eye. And right before my first experience, I had a really significant experience that was paranormal. And so that gave, the question out the window of whether there's an afterlife. And then that same night is whenever I listened to the meditation and found myself at the end of my bed. So bada bing, bada boom, there's two questions answered in one day. And it kind of took me at least a couple weeks to just let all that set in, that like, this isn't it, and I'm positive about that now. So I think that's great. I think that's one of my favorite takeaways from this.
yeah, it's certainly a life-altering experience, and it's well worth doing. And I'm just glad that I can help other people achieve it, and that we've got people around like Simon and the Astral Projection Techniques group to uh, help people and encourage them and get past the word.
I agree. I agree. I think it's a great thing we have going. Is there
Yeah,
anything else we wanted to cover today? We're definitely having you back, Bob. I have more I want to talk to you about.
I mean, I could literally talk about this stuff all day, so I'm looking forward to being back on the show again sometime. So keep me in
Simon,
mind.
too. I'd like to discuss just having experiences episode, maybe where we can talk about some more
Yeah,
of our
yeah.
favorite experiences, anything that we feel comfortable sharing,
Yeah,
just to give other people an idea of just things that we've had
Yeah.
happen to us. So that way people, because I know everybody always wants to know, why is this happening? And we
right.
don't know exactly why these things are happening to us. So you can't really explain somebody else's experience. That's their work to do, but it's nice to hear other people's experiences.
Yeah, yeah.
But Bob, you have a few books, Hacking the Out-of-Body Experience and
Yep.
Out-of-Body Experiences, How to Have Them and What to Expect. And
Yep.
then you also have, what was the other book? Those are the two that I've read that I'm
Well,
really familiar with.
the other one is Lessons Out of the Body, but it's kind of hard to find. My first book, the Out of Body Experiences, How to Have Them and What to Expect, was it's more about the story of how I got into this and what I actually found and what the books didn't tell me, and, trying to report facts. And a lot of that was inspired by Robert Monroe's first book, because he was trying to do the same thing. He was trying to report of what he had encountered and how to induce these experiences and all of that. And then the second book, the Lessons Out of the Body, I had this whole conglomeration of things like what things that I regretted never saying in the first book. And then a lot of it was like down to the spiritual, because these experiences, they're not just novelties. They're almost a spiritual awakening, and they can give you a really deep perspective on life and the afterlife. And so that book, The Lessons Out of the Body, was more about where it can take us spiritually, and why do this? Why have out of body experiences? What are you going to get from it? Well, you can learn a lot about yourself, about others, about the universe. And that was more about the spirituality of the out of body experience. The Hacking the Out of Body Experience is more about the science of how to induce them. So I don't really go into any of my personal experiences in that book. So I always say, if somebody's interested in out of body experiences, if they're choosing which book to start with of my books, I recommend the first book, because that's, the hacking is just about the how to induce the experience. It doesn't really talk about, what happened to me and the results and all of this stuff,
Right.
what you can expect. So it's kind of dry reading in that case. And of course, eventually I'm hoping to get another one out. Right now, I haven't, I'm not sure a lot of people know it, but I've retired. I used to be a computer guy full time, and I've been retired about a year and a half now. And I decided I'm going to start writing for me. So I started working on a novel just for the fun of it. And I just entirely by guidance or whatever, started writing this book about a Native American girl uh, in the 1880s. And So anyway, it's really different, but she has out of body experiences as part of the story. But anyway, so I've been working on fiction and having a lot of fun with that. When I'm done with that, I'm not sure I've got like 3 other books started, and I'm not sure which one I'm going to pick up. Part of me wants to continue on this sequel to Hacking the Out of Body Experience, where I go into great depth on things I've learned since that book was published, the 5.5 years since that book was published, and new discoveries in neuroscience and all of that. And part of me just wants to write more fiction. So I don't know. We'll see what happens.
I love your new book, Windwalker. I was blessed enough to read that. I know you've got drafts, and I'm getting started on that. I've been working on this podcast and editing it and figuring out the ins and out of that. But I'm ready to get started on the last draft that you sent me, and I feel lucky enough to read that because it's a great book. I'm excited to see what you've done with it so far.
Well, I'm just really happy that I can get people like you to read it and tell me what the story still needs. And like I just gave a copy to my sister, and she's a good proofreader, and so she's showing me, oh, you don't need she's down to the comma level, or you need a comma here, or you don't need a comma, whatever, capitalization problems. And
Right.
the draft really needs something like that. But yeah, I'm closing in on, I'm hoping to publish Windwalker by the end of 2025. So fingers crossed. We'll
That's
see.
I'll be
exciting.
looking forward to it. Yeah, it's a great.
Yeah,
What I read so far was great. I'm excited to see what you've done with it because I wanted to read more. A book's good if you want to read more or want to know more. So
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
excited about that.
And
So,
Simon, I know that you could certainly write a book, but I know that you read a lot too. So, what is the most recent book that you've read?
Samantha Lee Treasures, brilliant book.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I did cheat, because I am finding it hard to read lately. Find time to read, so I did actually get it on Audible, and she does her own
Yes,
Audible,
that's
and what a job!
I
Seamless,
know.
seamless. You can't even tell the breaks. I mean, obviously they must take breaks, but
Mm.
it's seamless. It's just beautiful. It gives it gives it that extra little something as well, that the actual author is narrating her own book.
More personal.
Yeah, and a really well-researched, good book, good, solid book.
Yeah.
Second that. I loved Samantha Treasure's book, and before that, Frank Labatt's book too. That's another really good one. There have been some really good books lately on the subject.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah,
So
and
as soon as I got that book, I read it. I want him on the team. I want him on the team. Same with same with Samantha.
Yeah.
Until inside
Well,
out,
I'm
I'm gonna send him a message. I'm gonna send him a message.
Well, I have to second Katie's request. Simon, I think you should write a book.
Oh,
Yes.
I don't think I'd be able to. I'm rubbish. I'm rubbish at writing.
We wouldn't go that far now.
Oh no, it'd be a. I'd have to just give it to somebody and just say, look, just make all that look like it's a book.
Yeah, but all of us over here would be. I mean, in the U.S. would be having a dictionary out trying to figure out some of those words, those slang words that you use.
Yeah, you
I would, I know, but it's been fun
but I know
learning
you
them
guys
too.
love us Brits, and we love you too. You sidewalks.
I love you guys. I love the group. I'm glad I met all you guys. I found friends in a lot of, us admin and some members, and it's been great. I really enjoy it. I don't know. I know it's changed my life, and I'm pretty sure most of us can feel that way. Just have a sense of community and somewhere to, lay our minds and our thoughts sometimes, It's nice to have. So we really appreciate you creating this and coming up with this little plan to make this group, and look what it's turned into.
Yeah.
In your wildest dreams, did you ever think it was going to get as big as it is,
Nope. I was expecting maybe 100 members if I were lucky.
Like, give yourself a pat on the back then.
Some of them growth spurts we had. I mean, we were averaging at one time. We were averaging something like 10,000 people a month. What we were accepting, and that all the ones what we were rejecting. You know what I mean?
I mean, sometimes we were declining as many as we were accepting. I couldn't believe it. I mean, it'd be 10,000 accepted, 8,000 declined.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if we weren't so particular and screened people a little bit, because we'd have a bunch of just rubbish in there and people posting things that don't need to be in there. And it's nice if you can't read and answer a few questions to enter a group like that, then what are you really going to bring to it, or are you there for the right reasons? So I'm glad we screen people some. And if we would let in everybody just off the, clicking the button and saying join, we'd probably have 1 million people by now. But it's the quality, not quantity, in my opinion. So
that's right. Yeah,
I enjoy it.
And it keeps it enjoyable for everybody else. We aren't seeing the people trying to sell us things.
Right.
What was it recently? Like a PlayStation or something,
there was a vote not long ago.
Yeah, it's good how you can get them in other groups.
There was a vote.
Yeah, you get them in other groups, and you can because you're in that group or you're modding that group, you can. Well, they're no good. They're coming out of that group as well.
Yeah.
And then
we have a really good admin and mod team, and we do a good job, I believe.
Yeah. I noticed that, when I got into the group, I felt versus some other groups, it's like, if somebody was saying something slightly, inappropriate or making fun of something, that, a comment I made or somebody else made, the admin team is on it. So it's just not tolerated. I think that makes it such a comfortable space. You feel comfortable to share.
I think that the whole idea is just to make everybody comfortable. There's nothing worse than posting and having somebody laugh at your post. And it's just, why are you here? And is it too just to laugh at people, So I'm glad that we stay on those things. Unfortunately, even whenever we remove people, those laugh reactions don't go away, but there's only so much we can control.
Yeah.
So I've really enjoyed talking with everybody today. This has been great. Katie, did you want to run something else by us?
How'd you know that? Yes, I do. I just want to say one more thing. We were talking about books and so listening, if anybody, wants to read, Bob's books and if some people are, readers, they like that physical book in their hand and, order books off Amazon or, however, but like Simon, was saying, and I really enjoy Audible, and it's just another way. If you're one of those people that you just feel like you don't have time to hold that book in your hand and read at home, then Audible's really nice option, if it is pay for that service, but you can find some of Bob's books on there and listen. That's how I've enjoyed, just on driving to and from work or wherever. It's just really nice to have that option.
It is. It's hard to find time sometimes, especially as moms and working, and it's hard to find time to sit down and just read a book. So having it in your ear and being able to walk around and do things and get things done is a nice option. I agree. I
Yeah.
will be putting Bob's books in the caption. I'm going to make, a little thing going on that lists all of his books and where to find them. And in our group, I will tag that in the caption. So I hope everybody enjoyed our conversation today. And I really enjoyed hanging out with you guys and
Yep.
looking forward to doing it again.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Great time, and thank you
Yeah.
so much for inviting me here, having me on the
Thanks for
show.
Thank you,
accepting it.
guys. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
All right. Well,
Right.
everybody, I hope you enjoyed
Yeah.
our episode, and we will see you again next time. Bye.
Bye.